Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Dave Fennoy here, and welcome to another Ask Dave Fennoy Anything on this Wednesday, the first Wednesday in September. Well, this year is going by fast. Thank goodness. 2020 has been a great disappointment. If I could return it to Amazon and get my money back, I would. Of course, Chadwick Boseman. Man, who would have thought? Gonna miss him. Want to thank him for all his great work, for Black Panther, for playing three just fabulous black people who made a difference in this world. James Brown. Well, anyway, we'll go on with that later. A couple other things. Want to remind you, Connection Open. Sometimes Source Connect goes down. I've been in that session where that happened, and Connection Open can and will come to the rescue. And if you're doing lessons with me, that you'll get 20% off, and you can visit connectionopen.com for more of that. And a reminder, next week, Ask Dave Fennoy God, speak, talk, Fennoy, wake up. Ask Dave Fennoy Anything will feature the one and only Randy Thomas. But right now, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine who is a master narrator of audiobooks, Mr. Scott Brick. There he is. Hello, how are you?
Dave, how are you? It's so
I'm
good to
doing
see
well. I'm doing well. Let's see, give myself a
you. You
little more
always
light.
look good. No matter, I think, I like to say that I think everybody on earth has a superpower, right? No matter how mundane your life, your superpower is that you don't get older.
Yeah, tell that to my gray hair.
You still, man, you're looking good.
Well, thank you. That's why I keep the room dark. So, that keeps the wrinkles away or something.
Sure.
Oh boy! So how are you?
I'm good.
And
good.
Couple things. I'll start with this. Years ago, you gave me a bottle of wine, manuscript, which was so appropriate. And you signed it, you autographed it for me. Wait a minute, they can't see it. There, they can see it. And somebody's trying to call me on the phone now. Why? So I got the bottle of wine, and I put it away, and I had a party. Somebody found that bottle of wine and drank it, and you were kind enough to give me another one and sign. I keep this one in my office. It's kind of tucked away and hidden. Maybe...
Well, I remember going to that party. It was a dinner party the night I gave you the first bottle.
Yeah.
And I'm in the store and I'm like, well, what should I get? And I'm like, let's get something appropriate. It was a manuscript. I'm like, well, this kind of has my name written all over it, right? Yeah. And then that was lovely when you asked me to sign it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, manuscript. Hey, come on now. Okay. Well, let's talk voiceover here. And a question for you: how many audiobooks have you narrated now?
I don't count them, but I do about a book a week on average. So every year I would tend to just add 50 to the number.
Okay. Well, I saw someplace, and I don't know when it was updated, but it was about 800 books then.
Yes. When I got to 900, I kind of hit the pause button, and I haven't updated it in a while. And my girlfriend and I, she's a narrator as well, Suzanne Freeman, and we both had. She had a milestone of the number of titles that she's done in her career, and so we were planning a party to celebrate both of our milestones, and then life happened, but. That was to celebrate the 1,000th book because it happened at some point in the last month or two.
Yeah, I was not sure exactly what date, but you passed it.
No clue.
You realize, of course, you have narrated more books than most people have read in a lifetime?
Yeah, I do realize that. And look, it's a privilege. I always say, I laugh as I say it, but it is a privilege. They pay me to be well read. And for years I've been hosting the SAG-AFTRA audiobook potluck. There's a narrator potluck where everybody in the audiobook community we gather and the union, our union organizers come in to town, and like the day before our annual meeting here in LA, we have a potluck at my place the night before. And for years, when we've been doing the invitation online, it's I just say, name a location, a house that book's built.
Ah, there
It's
you go.
true.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, I know the feeling. Yeah, it's House of Voice over here, for
Right.
sure.
Exactly.
I am not as singly focused, although I think these days most people think of me for video games. And I have to say, now you've done over 1,000 books. Um, I have narrated. Well, I used to say three, but the truth is it's five. I've narrated 5 books, and I hope to
And
never.
nominated for an audio award for one of them, I
I
know.
was for the very first book I did. I was nominated for an
Oh, now you
audio.
see, you blow the curve for everybody.
Um, and but I just don't have it in me. I don't have the patience. Uh, how do you do it? 8 hours a day or 5 hours? How long do you record in a day?
It depends on the deadline. What I aim for is it usually takes about 2 hours to get one finished hour done.
Yeah.
Uh, so I aim to get 3 finished hours a day.
So you're
And
looking
what
at
is
6 hours a day.
six hours?
Now,
Sometimes it takes 8 if it's a really difficult, dense project.
yeah, I think most people are probably looking at 3 or 4 hours to get a finished hour done. Let me ask you this: do you do your own editing, or do you pass it off to someone?
Oh, I no. Ooh. The last thing I want to do is
Oh no,
last thing I want to do
I
is
could not
listen to
possibly
myself.
do my own editing.
No, no, no. But what I mean by that is, I am a big proponent of doing what you do best, and don't bother with the learning curve on the rest. I would have to do so much studying to be an artist as an editor. I know barely enough about. I know just enough about editing to be dangerous. And the way I look at it is, I I think audiobooks are best when they're collaborative.
Yes.
And look, I don't I so I don't do my own taxes, right? I don't, I go to an investment advisor. I have somebody who does my yard and somebody who cleans my house, and I I
You do
I
what
work
you
with
do
people.
best, and let
Focus on
others
what
handle
you
some
do
other
best.
things.
Yeah, I don't even do my own research for the books and looking up all the words and the names and the place names, whatever it is, words and phrases in foreign languages that I don't speak. I don't do that research. I go to an expert, somebody who is an artist in their field.
Okay. Well,
I
listen,
I just
I'm getting
focus on the job.
I'm getting some questions here that other people want to ask, and
Sure.
this is one I want to ask too. Laura Chat says, Scott, how did you get started?
Well, I knew I always wanted to do audiobooks, but I didn't know how, and my agent at the time didn't know how because it's not technically the entertainment industry; it's the publishing industry. They just hire entertainers, but at the time they didn't know that they could go to the breakdowns, which is what my
Ah,
agent was looking at all the time. There were never any audiobook auditions in breakdowns. I got in because of a buddy of mine that I'd gone to college with. He worked at Dove Audio, which was famous at the time for doing the Faye Resnick book, the Nicole Brown Simpson's best friend.
yeah.
That memoir had come out on audio, and suddenly it was 1999. People were suddenly paying attention, and you know, I met a guy on my very first day. His name is Dan Musselman. Dave, I know you've met him over the
Oh
years.
yeah.
He's a lovely guy, and he's the executive producer now in Los Angeles, the producer at Penguin Random House Audio.
Okay.
And my first day in that studio was his last day in that studio. He left to do this new job, which is he's still at, and he kind of made me his go-to guy.
Okay.
And
So right off the bat, were you good?
I don't know. I think I think what we do, there's a certain amount of there's a certain amount that is teachable, but there's also a certain amount that is a gift that you
Yes.
either have or
Yes.
you don't.
Yeah.
Anybody can learn to draw, but will they really become an artist? I mean, technically, yes. There's a lot of technique that you and I and a lot of other instructors can teach, but unless you have that storytelling ability, I think that I don't know if it's something that's necessarily just innate in you, or if you just trust yourself enough that you don't worry about the way other people want to hear a story told. You just tell the story the way you want to tell it.
Well, you're coming back to something that I say all the time, which is you are the best you can be. When you're trying to be somebody else, you're not going to be nearly as good. And the thing that so many of us spend years messing up is not trying to be ourselves, but trying to, oh, I want to do it like that guy or that gal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a little magic in everybody. And if you just embrace that, um, you're doing well. Oh, wait a minute. I got another question here. Thomas Ritz. Question, when time allows, Scott, I admire Elmore Leonard writing. Is there anyone for you that writes better dialogue, and do you enjoy delivering those amazing words that delineate each character so well?
There's a lot of people whose dialogue I don't just admire it, I revere it. There's a lot of authors. Elmore Leonard is amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I can also point to Nelson DeMille. I can point to Greg Hurwitz. He does an amazing thriller series called Orphan X. And there are times, you're working on this seemingly straightforward, thriller, international espionage and such. And suddenly there's an exchange between two lovers that just nails me. And I stop and I have to take a moment and kind of collect myself. That it blows me away when authors are able to capture that feel. And yeah, sometimes I'll say these lines 2 or 3 times out loud just because I want the fun.
Okay, well, just between me and you, those conversations between the lovers, some great dialogue. Do you ever just kind of use that?
I confirm nor deny nothing.
Okay.
I will say that the hardest time I have ever had with a book was Nelson DeMille. He opened a book called Nightfall, and it had the randiest sex scene that I've ever read. And I couldn't do it because the director was a woman and because I knew that my mom would listen to this book.
Oh.
So, yeah.
All of our moms, no matter what they said, they had to get naked and do the belly dance at least once. That's how we got here.
At least once.
At least once. So they might tell, oh, don't do it. Oh, why? But no, yeah. Everybody's mom and daddy did the wild thing a few times, Let's see. Tony Figueroa says, I love the book collection behind you, Scott, which gives me a question. Have you read all those books? And do you ever read just for fun away from the microphone?
Oh, I tell you what, this is actually my favorite bookshelf in my home. I'm sitting in my office. I am such a book fan. You can't see it, but my office door is a frosted glass pane, and it says Spade and Archer, Confidential Investigators, from the Maltese Falcon.
Oh yeah,
and it's the exact same font and the exact same design as from the film. I have a copy of the Maltese Falcon up there, the actual Maltese Falcon. This is my Hollywood history shelf, and I read it almost every day. To be honest, during the pandemic, I heard some really wonderful advice, and it was athletes, professional athletes, speaking to collegiate athletes, knowing that their season would be either cut short or cut altogether, and they said, "This is upon us. We have forced isolation. Come out of it better than you went into it. Find something, find an interest, a hobby, a passion, and pursue it. Make yourself better." And look, I've always been a fan of silent film. Most of these books right here are about silent movies. And I have all these dozens of books, but when did I actually sit down and read them?
Yeah.
Well, when my girlfriend came over and we started sheltering in place and sharing my booth, she's in it for the first half of the day, I'm in it for the second half. While she was in the booth, I'd sit in my recliner over here and just read about Hollywood history.
Now, see, now I know me. I'd sit in the recliner and fall asleep. I'd be drooling out of the side.
Once or twice.
Oh, somebody I think you know, Jack Daniel. Hey there, Scott and Dave. I appreciate that between you there's enough facial hair to keep a small mammal quite warm. Bravo.
Hey, this is my tonsorial protest. I ain't gonna shave until it's safe to go out and buy razor blades.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, I ask everybody about their studio and their equipment.
Sure.
So, what are you working with?
Well, I have a recently purchased Studio
Ah,
Brick One.
don't you own the company?
Well, it does kind of have my name on
Yeah.
it. Uh, I previously had just this storage area. Didn't even have a door on it, but it was the area underneath my stairs. And I brought in a contractor and I walled it off and I put in a door and soundproofed it. And but I did that about 12 years ago. But I felt like Harry Potter living my life under the stairs and just, it was just so tiny and it worked. But I recently bought the Studio Brick. It's a fairly simple setup. It's the M-Box Pro. I work with a Focusrite, and I use a Rode microphone, a Rode K2.
Mm-hmm. Now, revealing secrets here, we had a little chat beforehand. Um, why the road?
Yeah. So 12 years ago, when I first started, I had been asked to do a very long book, Atlas Shrugged, and I was a third of the way through, 19 hours in, and I had been using the Sennheiser 416, which I used at Penguin well, it was Random House Audio at the time, and people kept telling me, your voice really works well with the 416, and I barely know what that means, so I got the 416. And I did the first 19 hours, and the publisher, when I sent it off to them so they could start editing it, they said, "We need you to switch microphones." I was like, "Why? It's a 416. I work with it all the time."
Yeah.
And it was the same publisher I had done a book for the week before, and I said, "Hang on, I sent you 2 books on the 416. Why did you not tell me until now?" They said, "Well, Atlas Shrugged is kind of a big deal. And the microphone that was okay enough for the vampire detective novel isn't quite going to cut it for Ayn Rand." And so they sent me the Rode K2.
Hmm.
Bob Dion, bless his heart. He passed away a number of years ago, but he came out and he kind of took my studio for a test drive and determined the K2 would be good. And I figured, look, they bought me the microphone, and I figured, all right, fine, I'll use it for their book. But before I went back to the 416, I took the 416 and I went and I got a Neumann as well, the U87, I guess, and if I recall, and I recorded the same piece of text, one paragraph. It was a minute long, and I read it once with the Rode K2. I stopped. I switched the microphone. I read it with the 416. I read it with the Neumann, and I sent it to all the publishers I was working for at the time. And these were people who used the Sennheiser and the Neumann themselves, and they all said, "Your space, it really suits that Rode. The Rode suits your space."
Okay, which we've talked about before. Just because it's a great mic doesn't mean it's going to be a great mic for the space that you're in.
Exactly.
I've got a mic collection. I keep coming back to my 416 and my 103 because the U87 that I spent much more money for likes a huge room, high ceilings and all of that.
Yeah.
So I try to warn people all the time, don't just go get a 416 because you think that's going to be great. You want to try some things out. And there are lots of good mics out there. Of course, nowadays with studios, people are asking, what have you got? You have to be a little bit careful about having a mic that they recognize, so they're not nervous.
Yeah.
Somebody asked the question, oh boy, what does it take? How do you find work as an audiobook narrator? And what does it take to be an audiobook narrator?
It's what you need to do, like any other area of voiceover. You have to you have to have your demos, right? You need to have them up online. There are websites, specific casting websites for audiobooks specifically. ACX.com, for those of you who aren't aware, it stands for Audiobook Creation Exchange. It's like Match.com, setting up rights holders and narrators. They just hook up in a different way. But then there's also ahabcasting.com, which is Penguin Random House's internal website used exclusively for casting. You can actually audition through both of those sites. So you need to not only have your demos on your own website, streaming, ready to listen to, you need to have profiles on all of those casting websites. Then it's shoe leather, it's elbow grease, you know, to use the metaphor, there's a certain amount of, being social and putting your name out there and doing the work and contacting. I had a student recently who sent out a query letter. Basically, it's an email, obviously, but it's you're querying the publisher saying, hey, you know what? I've done this work. This is what I've done. I see this is what you've done. I think I'd be good doing what you do. And he got a lot of feedback within 24, 48 hours. It's amazing what just putting in the effort, and he looked up individual publishers and said, you know what, you do a great job on the James Patterson books. I listen to those all the time. I would love to be able to help you do what you do. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing the kind of response you can get.
I've told people all that. I get a lot, I've just got my demo done for video games. How do I get into video games? And people think just sending that, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's my demo, hire me, doesn't work. Find out something about the person that you're talking to. Find out what they've done. Do a little research. Be able to speak knowledgeably, if only a little bit, about their company and the games they've done, or in your case, their company and the books that have been narrated by their narrators.
It's easy enough to find, right? We are hyperactively connected in this day and age, right?
For better or worse.
For better or worse, yeah, exactly. But I know a lot of the people, because I work in the industry, have been long enough, that most of the people that he was emailing are people that I've worked with. And a number of them reached out to me and said, I really like the fact, this guy is like a go-getter. He did a really great job. I love the fact that he could tell us, the work that we have done, specific books, series authors, titles that they've done. It matters. It means it's a sexier introduction when you get in touch and say, hey, I know that you produced that collection of Stephen King short stories, rather than saying, dear casting person at Simon & Schuster, I'm a narrator, and I know you guys make audiobooks. I would like to do some with you. There's clearly no effort on the latter.
Oh yeah. And a lot of times you need to keep track of who you wrote to and what you said, so you can circle back. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's going to get back to you right away. People are leading busy lives, and often I think we give up too soon. I remember my first voiceover agent. It was a couple months or 3 before she got back to me, and she only got back to me, I think, because I kept calling. And she had me come in for an interview. I spoke with her, and she says, well, you've got talent. Your demo sucks. It's way too long, way too much local retail. Go back, redo it, and come back and see me in 6 months. And I think she was trying to find out, was I really going to do it? I've got another question I see.
Following instructions, that's the coin of the realm for an agent, a manager, or a teacher.
Yeah.
When they give you advice, sometimes it's to find out, are you going to do it?
Yeah. Okay, Michael Woodley, when you began, what were some roadblocks that you came across, and how did you overcome them?
I'll tell you the biggest roadblock I ever hit. I went back and I listened to some of the stuff that I did early on, and I realized that because I came at this from a stage and screen background, like many of us did, Um, I was a theater major at UCLA, and I remember my director saying, in a stage, my first main stage role, he said, Scott, and he stood 6 feet away from me, and he said, I'm the camera, and you're giving me exactly what I need for TV or film. But I need you to reach me. And then he goes out into the audience, he goes to the back row, and he starts waving his hands. I need you to reach me back here. And so from that moment, and I'm 18 years old, I kind of looked at entertainment through essentially there are two ways I could look at this. I have to reach 60 feet away, or I need to reach 6 feet away. I can be big, or I can be intimate. And it never occurred to me that when I started doing voiceover work, specifically audiobook work, that I only needed to reach people right here.
Yeah.
Because it's your mouth, sometimes it's like that far away from the microphone, which means you're that far away from their eardrum. And I realized that there is subtlety that can be achieved through voice work that was never allowed for in any of those two models, stage or screen. And I think a lot of us, it's like when silent movie stars got hired, right? The early silent movie stars, sorry, I'm a geek that way. They would hire vaudevillians who were really big, which is why the early silent movies were very, presentational and demonstrative. But
they're coming from stage, and
exactly,
you've got to be big.
They didn't.
Hence the stage whisper.
Right, exactly. They didn't know how to translate that skill set that they had into a new medium because they didn't understand the new medium. And the same thing happened when radio actors got hired for TV or for film. There was always a transition period. And I wish I had realized earlier that I could be small and still be, and perhaps be more effective.
Okay, I've got another question here from David Fairweather. Do you read the whole book before you decide to narrate it, or before you begin narration, or only as you're narrating?
Great question. You definitely want to read the book ahead of time for that part of the question. I mean, especially if it's a whodunit, you need to know whodunit.
So you read the whole book before you before you do any recording?
Well, yes, ideally. Sometimes you get it so late that you only get to read the first 100 pages before you start recording the first 100 pages.
Okay.
And to go back to the other part of the question, I don't always, read it. You don't have time to read an entire manuscript before you say that you'll do the job. I have a lot of friends of mine, a lot of colleagues of mine, they work in romance and erotica. and there are certain things that they don't want to deal with. And so there are keywords.
The piston of passion.
Yes, right, exactly. You can probably imagine what these keywords are, that when they get the manuscript, they get the PDF and they plug it into the search feed, right? Yeah. That's how a lot of books get determined whether you do them or not. If it's a series, I've done almost 80 books by Clive Cussler. And, they don't have to send me the new one before they know whether I'm going to do it or not. Yeah, I've done all the others. Of course I'm going to do it. And there's no objectionable material, in terms of those keywords. But sometimes, look.
Let me ask, if somebody has done erotica, would that hurt them if they're trying to switch to some other genres of audiobooks?
I think that's certainly a fear that a lot of people have. A lot of colleagues of mine have talked to me about it. I don't think so. First of all, because most narrators use, look, my girlfriend, Suzanne Freeman is her name, but she goes by Samantha Cook when she does the erotica work. Mm-hmm. And
you just blew her cover. You just blew her cover.
Oh, that's all right. She's out. She's out. Some narrators aren't, though. It all depends on how you want to navigate, your career. So, the books that get done under the pseudonym, you're not typically going to be judged by those. Nevertheless, at the other end of the spectrum, in the extreme cases, it has happened. The very first woman who was hired to do the 50 Shades of Grey series back in the
Mm-hmm.
day before it really became 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
She worked a lot with Disney, and she said,
Mm.
even if I use a pseudonym, I work for them so much that people will know.
Yeah.
And so she said no,
Yeah.
and totally get it. That makes sense.
Well,
But
you know, it's in the commercial world, video game world, narration, whatever it is. We all have a line we won't cross.
yeah,
I've often been asked, you know, would you do commercials for places you don't eat, cars you don't drive? So I'm like, well, of course, that's the job we have. But even saying that, there are things, lines that I won't cross. So I imagine the same thing is true in audiobooks.
I got asked to audition for a political party whose longtime um, voiceover, the voice of the campaign, I believe it passed away, and I cannot abide having my name or my voice attached to their ideals, and that's okay. You know, look, I don't get paid to be political.
Yeah.
It can't change the fact that you are,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You do have your own belief system.
Yeah.
And I always say to everybody, you know, every voiceover artist draws their line in the sand in a different place.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's arbitrary. It's the place that matters most to them.
Yeah.
I don't do books about child abuse. I don't do books with, you know, really horrible sexual violence. I don't want to live with that for a week.
Yeah.
That said, I have done those books, but you know, the experience just, it's wearying. It makes it very difficult to leave your work at the studio, even
Oh
if your
boy.
studio's in
Yeah.
your basement.
Yeah. Let's see. I've been listening to your Alexander Hamilton. That's a
Oh.
long ass book, says David Fairweather.
Yeah, that was the basis for the Lin-Manuel Miranda musical.
Oh yeah.
He read that book on his honeymoon and got the idea for the musical.
That just
That was
doesn't sound like a good
before
idea to spend your honeymoon reading a book, but okay.
Right.
Got a question here. A question for Scott. Are there any exercises you do to prepare yourself for all the hours you have to put in for an audiobook? Does your voice ever get tired?
Uh, yes, it can. It depends on how much I have to get done that day. Um, More so than exercises. I mean, yes, there was a time back in March. I don't know if it was COVID or what, but I got nailed. I had been in New York for the Audio Awards. Suzanne and I were there. We came home. She was sick by the time the plane landed in LA. I got sick a couple of days later. And when I was recovering, I needed to be better ASAP. So I was spending a lot more time in the shower and kind of doing the, you know, exercises as I'm inhaling the steam.
Inhaling the steam.
Yeah.
Oh, been there,
I'm
done
like,
that.
hey, whatever somebody says might work, I'll give it a try when you're that desperate. But more than anything else, what I pay attention to make sure my voice doesn't get tired, doesn't wear out, and can recover by the next day is I drink a shit ton of water. Sorry, I didn't ask if we could cuss on these.
Oh yeah, well, you know.
I dropped the S bomb.
Well, God damn it. Shit.
Fucking
Why
hell,
would you
really?
do that?
How
Fuck.
could you tell me? I drink a fuck ton of water is what I do. I have a liter water bottle, and I drink 2 of those before I even start recording in the morning.
Wow.
Because hydration, look, the larynx, your vocal cords, they're a muscle, and any chiropractor will tell you muscles fail without water.
And
So-
now, let me go back to what you said. You drink a liter or 2 liters?
2.
2 liters of water before you start in the morning.
Yes,
And
that's my-
how long before you start in the morning?
From the moment I wake up.
Okay.
The first I've done a lot of research on hydration and how much you can absorb safely, because it's possible to drink too much.
Yeah.
And you can on average during the day, for most of the day, you can absorb a liter per hour. But you don't do it all at once. You do like a quarter liter every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But the first hour that you're awake, you're parched. You're dehydrated from 8 hours without water. So during those first few hours, you can absorb 2 liters, which is why the first hour I'm awake, that's when I'm slamming.
Just
all
slam
that
it.
water.
Do you drink coffee or tea?
I I, I I used to drink a lot of caffeine. It was either like a Diet Coke or tea. I've never been a coffee drinker, but now I weaned myself off of it months ago, kind of when this all started. And I'll have it now only when it's really difficult to wake up. When I'm really having a problem, I'll go out and brew up some tea.
Okay. Um, Pamela Tansey, mic distance is an art form you have.
Yes. Uh, oh, that I have, or I thought she was saying in general.
I
Um,
well, I don't know if she was talking to you, me, both of us. But
well,
talk about mic distance and recording a little bit.
my one of my favorite stories of my career happened with a wonderful director named Christina Rooney, and we were working on a series called The Passage, and it was this post-apocalyptic vampire, end of the world scenario.
Oh, so 2020.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, it had a character in the first two books who spoke telepathically, and he was called Zero. He was Patient Zero. He was the first vampire, and anybody that he had turned, he could speak to them no matter where they were in the world. He could speak to them telepathically. Okay. Well, the words that he said, he was summoning them. So he would say, "Come to me," over and over. "Come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me." And they were in italics. And I'm like, okay, all right. So this is happening in somebody's head. Okay, I know. Yeah, and there's no indication of what this guy was like, what his accent would be, his socioeconomic background. There's nothing. Uh, so I just said, okay, how do I sound like I'm in somebody's head? I got really, really close to the microphone and I whispered and I said, "Come to me, come 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 to me." And, it was effective. It's creepy. Okay, well, the first two books, it worked. But then in the third book, they explained who he was. And there, suddenly, for 160 pages, it was all told from his point of view. And
Ooh.
he's speaking first person.
So
And
you
now
had
I
to.
know where he came from. The specific East Coast American accent that he might have. I know his educational background. And I was speaking with Christina, and I said, we could change it, but I've already for 30 hours these two books they were both longer than 20 hours. So at this point, I'm like 40 hours of my voice whispering to people as that character. And I said, I kind of want to do the same thing. And she just smiled and she goes, "Tell me more." And I said, well, he's really kind of an affected guy. And, he's quoting Shakespeare all the time. And it's one of these situations where like one of his vampires comes and finds him in his lair and he says, "So you want to know who I am? Very well. I shall tell you my story." It's one of those things. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
a little over the top. I said, "This is what I want to do. I want to whisper the whole thing. I want to get really, really close and go for that proximity effect." And she said, "You sure?" And I said, "Yes." And she went and she spoke to the editor, and I had to work without a pop filter, right? So they had to do more work on the in the post production phase. But for 2 full days, 160 pages, I just "So you want to know my story? Very well. I shall tell you." And it just sometimes that works.
How did your voice hold up?
Well, I had to actually I had to actually drink a lot more water than I usually do because whispering is harder on your voice than
Yes. Yeah.
speaking at full volume.
That's why I ask. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
It's one of the things. If you have a cold, sore throat, the last thing in the world you want to do is whisper, because it's tougher on your throat. And I can't imagine going page after page after page after page whispering. Wait a minute. Got a comment here. Let's see. Joe Cipriano. I work a
Joe.
lot. I work in erotica, but I'm not an audiobook narrator. Thank you,
Well,
Joe.
you're a handsome man, Joe. I can absolutely see that.
Question here from Laura Chats. Is there a market for foreign languages?
Yes, absolutely. Um, well, I live in Los Angeles. There's a lot of Latino performers here, and there is a big market for Spanish-speaking audiobooks. I can think of a couple of companies off the top of my head that specialize in that. But there are audiobooks look, most anywhere there's a publisher in whatever language they speak, there is a market
And
for audio.
because the world is smaller now, thanks to the internet, whatever language you speak, say you speak Portuguese, you could probably find the publishers in
Yeah,
Portugal and Brazil. If you speak Laotian, you could,
yeah.
because books are coming in every language. So absolutely,
I I had a student from the Dominican Republic years ago, and he said, "Look, I know I need to get rid of my accent. All my teachers tell me that." And I said, "Why the hell would you do that? Your accent is who you are."
yeah,
And uh, really good directors will tell you they're not hiring a voice; they're hiring your life experience.
yeah.
It's the only way to bring authenticity to a book. So I say, whatever makes you you, lead with that.
Wow, I love that. I absolutely love that. I remember years ago, it's probably 20 years ago, I was part of a conference for SAG after, well, it was after then. Um, and I had a number of people who had accents from around the world who wanted to know A, how to lose their accent, and B, was it really a problem? And at the time, it was, yeah, you need to find out
Sure.
how to lessen that a little bit. That your working in your accent will be a specialty thing. I could never say that now. The world has changed.
Well, look, especially yes, the world has changed a lot since over time. I think it's been a while since it was a good idea to lose an accent, but especially now,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we all know that trying to whitewash things
yeah, yeah,
is not a good idea.
yeah.
What people can hear, they can. I'd say they can sniff it a mile away, but it's the
Yeah,
wrong sense. What they can hear a mile away is authenticity,
yeah.
and in the same measure, inauthenticity, you faking something is just as apparent.
Which is why that over enunciated and just too happy guy, that's so just not
I know.
what they're
I know.
hiring. Question here from Garrett David: is there voice bias in the industry culturally? This kind of fits in with what we're talking about.
Well, I would love to pretend otherwise. I would love to, but um, the fact of the matter is, for as long as I've been in it, the audiobook industry has been very gender and ethnicity centric, which
Hmm.
means um, if a white woman writes the book, they usually get a white woman to narrate it. If a black man writes a book, they'll probably hire or a Latino man or a woman or whatever the culture is. They've done their best to be authentic for a long time now, but still there are times when that's overlooked. We There's a publisher I work with, a thriller series I do. I'm about to do the sixth one in the series, and the author has gone out of his way to really say that Scott is the voice of this franchise, and he's a very generous guy in that way. And there was a short story that's bridging books 5 and 6, and it just came out, and it's about a girl named Joey, who this main character of the thriller series, about a white man. He's been the lead in every other story, but for this short story, it was Joey, who's a ward of his, an orphan that he kind of took under his wing. She's Latina. Her accent has never been described, as being. Frankly, she grew up in a circumstance where they've never once described her accent, so I've never once used it. I like to think it's like, well, the role says it's a black man or a brown woman. Do I have to really try to sound like that? How about we just make them sound like people? So that's the way I've always just approached her character. But there was a discussion saying, look, this is an hour-long short story about a brown girl. And is it a good idea to keep Scott on the as the voice just for this story? And this came up after I had already done it. And I let them know, and they got in touch with me about the same time and said, yeah, we're kind of wondering whether we want to keep with this or maybe go a different direction just for this book. just for this story. And I said, I'm fine either way you choose. I understand from a marketing perspective, having me as the voice of that franchise matters to them, but being authentic matters too.
Yeah.
But because nothing has ever really been made of her ethnicity, she grew up an orphan, she didn't really know that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Just finally decided, yeah, we're going to keep Scott on it. But I'm like,
And you know, I kind of understand that in we think of people coming from a particular ethnic group, say, or nationality group, that everybody's speaking a certain way, and there's a certain general truth sometimes to that, but
sure,
there are a lot of outliers. There are a lot of
yeah.
outliers that they're this, but they grew up with that, and now when you hear them, they're that. You look at them, they're this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, happens a
The
lot.
the fact of the matter is, when you're working on a book, authors quite often write with a stereotype in mind. People are typed in books, and you can't help it, right? There's nothing I can do to change the author's backgrounds or their outlook or their beliefs. And quite often, the worst is when characters are written in dialect, especially if it's like a poor Southern black dialect. It gets really awful, and that's the worst part of my job.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Um,
you know, it's interesting. I have this conversation in video games about characters that are different than you. And I've played, you know, some very brilliant characters and some characters that may be brilliant but not particularly educated. And those are the kinds of distinctions that you have to make, that just because somebody is wealthy and has been educated doesn't mean they're smart or have
yeah.
wisdom. And just because somebody is poor and didn't have an education doesn't mean that there's not genius there.
Intelligence and wisdom
Yeah.
are two very different things.
I
Yeah.
often tell students, listen, one of the things you want to figure out, how smart is this character? Not
Mm-hmm.
just, you know,
Yes.
how smart is this character?
Yeah. How intuitive
Yeah.
are they? How
Yeah.
empathetic are they?
Yeah.
And I remember years ago I was working on a series where a really wonderful character. He was actually, the way he was written at first was slightly offensive when I first read it, but what he did, the part of the story that he helped convey, you know, through his POV, was really wonderfully drawn. And it was a guy who, well, he was a cameo in each book, happened maybe once or twice in each book. He was the receptionist at the main character's girlfriend's firm, and he was written as flamboyantly gay. And the author went to the extent of describing his lisp. Well, I hate to tell you, people, gay people don't tend to lisp.
Yeah, I was gonna say, ooh,
It's
this.
an affectation. It's an affectation that heterosexuals do typically when they're mocking gay people.
Yeah, yeah,
But it isn't. It isn't authentic for what they did. So I faced the quandary. Well, it's written in the script, but it would likely be offensive. What
yeah.
do I do? And I've for years believed that I have paid attention. I've read a lot of books about by writers for writers about how to write. Stephen King had this great memoir years ago, and called On Writing. And every bit of advice that he gave writers, I thought would be brilliant for narrators as well.
What was
If
some
you
of that
want to be
advice?
I'm sorry.
What was some of that advice?
Okay, he said, if you want to be a better writer, read voraciously. So I tell narrators, you want to be a better narrator, read voraciously. The more you know about story and why writers do what they do, the better you'll be able to help them do what they do.
Yeah.
So for years, when I've heard the word writer, if it's a bit of advice, I switch out narrator. And my favorite author of all time, Richard Matheson, had five rules for being a good writer. Rule number one, don't be an asshole. Rule number 2 through 5 were don't be an asshole. And I thought, that's the advice I'm going to follow when it comes to this gay character. It says that he lisps. I can play him accordingly, but I don't have to lisp, because if I do, then that will be the bridge too far.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I've got a question here. Oh, David Fairweather. Hey, Scott, tell Dave he should do more audiobooks. He's done a few and he's good, but he says he doesn't like doing them. David Fairweather, I'm unfriending you on Facebook, and
But Dave, you really should do more audiobooks because you're good at
well, thank you. And I may, just because you said so.
them.
Mitch Watson. You know Mitch Watson?
Mitch.
He said, Scott Brick owes me money. Tell you what, Mitch, we live in the same neighborhood. I'll get him to drop it off to me, and I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, true story. Mitch and I went to UCLA, and I had this very important trip I needed to take, and I was dead broke. And he loaned me $50 in order for me to buy the plane ticket. And it took me a long time because I was, of course, a church mouse. But I paid him back, Mitch.
Oh, he also says Scott Brick owes his career to me.
Well, that's true.
Hey, listen, we're getting close to the end of this. Can you give me some tips on the do's and don'ts of a good audiobook narrator? What are the things people should avoid doing? You've given a lot of that just in the conversation, but if you had to go, okay, 1 through 5, 1 through 10, some things to do, some things to avoid, what might those be?
But I think there's a couple of things I try to do. First thing I do is I think our most important job as a performer of any kind is to tell your inner critic to shut the fuck up. Because the only way that we can tell a story is by sharing something of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the more you listen to the inner critic, the less able you are to share. That sharing will never happen. So start that way. When you get cast to do a book, don't doubt yourself. Instead, flip it around and realize that by virtue of your being cast, that you are the perfect person for the job. I say every person who got cast in an audiobook has been perfectly cast because it was them. My next bit of advice is to, going back to something I said earlier, is lead with yourself. Whoever you are, the way that you uniquely tell a story, employ that. I mean, that's the juice, right? When I listen to colleagues of mine who are also really good friends, and I hear them playing a character that gets angry, I'm like, wow, I know how he sounds when he gets angry.
I better not piss him off.
Right, well, exactly, but it's like he's doing the exact same thing here as this character because that is authentic. That is how, Bob Bray or John Lee or, Jeffrey Kafer gets angry. Great. That is the authenticity that you need. Nothing, 100 of us could be given the exact same copy. And if we are true to ourselves and trust ourselves that we were perfectly cast, then all 100 are going to sound different. And that's a good thing because there's no right way to do an audiobook. There's your way, the way that you know to tell a story.
Yeah, but I bet there's a wrong way.
Well, certain instances, certain books, I'm sure. Yes, I've heard a few that make me go, oh. But typically it's when that narrator was trying to sound like an audiobook narrator. In the same way that you were demonstrating earlier, that over-enunciated rendition of voiceover lines.
Yeah.
They're not speaking like themselves. They're speaking the
like
way
they think they should be.
Expect them
to
speak. Go with yourself.
Yeah. Let's see. Question here, kind of for me, I think. Dave is SAG-AFTRA. Oh no, it's for you. Dave is SAG-AFTRA. Are you, and is there an advantage in being SAG-AFTRA?
I am. I'll start off by saying I don't have a horse in this race. If you're not, I'm not here to condemn you. I am very active in the union. I'm on the audiobook steering committee. I do as much as I can to help SAG-AFTRA because, especially in their work in the audiobook realm, even if you're not a SAG-AFTRA member, they work to make sure that you are working under a union contract so that you get the same benefits that a union performer makes. And should you ever decide to join, you can reap the benefits of those previous projects. They keep that for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring up here, Randy Thomas weighs in on that question.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about this, people see the questions and sometimes,
Sure.
and Randy's my guest next week.
Yeah.
Not necessarily if you specialize in audiobooks, but healthcare and a pension at the end of your career is a benefit.
Right.
And, people who are, 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s may not be thinking about growing old and needing a pension.
Yeah.
Uh, but I guarantee it's going to come in handy at some point when they've decided not to hire you anymore.
There is a time when we all felt we were young and immortal,
Yes.
right? When we were young, we felt immortal.
Yeah.
And by the way, hi Randy. I haven't seen her in a couple of years. I love Randy. But yes, there does come a time. And for me personally, again, I say this: I don't have a horse in this race.
Yeah.
Join or not join.
Yeah.
I hope you do, just because of the benefits I know that I have gotten. I grew up with diabetes. Insurance was always an issue for me. I cried the day my insurance card arrived because of the pressure that it took off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I thought about how free I was from that weight. And matter of fact, I took it's somewhere out there on social media. I took a picture. I covered my number, and I took a photo of my card, and I said, "This changes my life."
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I got hit with a major medical issue. And if it wasn't for my union health insurance, and if it wasn't for my union, federal credit union that helped me buy this house, if it wasn't for those two things, I would have become just another medical bankruptcy.
Yeah, it looks like you've been hit with another medical problem here with the sling that you're wearing there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I broke my collarbone a couple of days ago.
Oh,
Um,
were you fighting off an intruder? Perhaps you were skydiving, or went to
you
the
know,
beach and a shark tried to attack. What happened?
I would love to say that it was for a noble cause and that I was doing something heroic, but the fact of the matter is, my contractor came over to install my new booth, my studio brick, and
Yeah, rub it in, rub it in.
yeah, sorry, Dave. Um, and I asked him to do one more thing. We needed to turn off the electricity, and I said, "Well, I'll go out in my backyard and I'll turn off the circuit breaker." And when I got to the circuit breaker, 2 feet away from me was a skunk with its ass aiming right at my face, with its tail straight up in the air, and I ran. And it was uneven terrain, and I tripped and I fell and I landed on a rock and I broke my collarbone. So
Oh boy.
yeah,
So,
I
but the question everybody wants to
I
know:
got maimed by a skunk. Dave, are you happy making me a?
did you get sprayed?
No, no, thank God. And I'll tell you what, my dog used to get sprayed all the time in our backyard, and she got sprayed 3 times in 1 week. And having watched her each time, at one point I said to her, "I'm like, you're not in this for the hunting, are you?" Um, uh, but it's rancid. You cannot sleep in the same room with that smell. And if it
Well,
was on
you know
me,
what? Did you try
oh,
the tomato juice?
I did not get sprayed.
Oh
I
no,
managed.
but with your dogs.
No, I went with there's something called I think it's like the Pet Miracle or something. It's
Oh
they
yeah,
sell
there's
it
that.
at
But you know what works? Summer's Eve.
Summer's Eve.
Summer's Eve. It's a woman's product. I I,
Oh
I won't
yes,
go
of
any
course.
further. Those who know. Those who don't can find out.
Yeah,
Um, Charity James. Hey Scott, who do you like better, Dave Fennoy or Pat Fraley?
that's really unfair.
That really is unfair.
That
Uh,
really is unfair.
but we both
I'm
love
going to be
Pat. We
pushover.
both love Pat Fraley.
I adore Pat Fraley.
Yeah,
I have
and
Pat is one of the joys of my life. He emailed me. We talk every couple of days, and he emailed me out of the blue for no reason at all to tell me this wonderful theatrical anecdote about Richard Burton and an older British actor who was a very famous stage actor in the early 50s and an inveterate drunk. And one day Burton runs into him, and it's before, it's like around noon. And so they go out to a pub and they have a few pints, and then they have a few more. And the other actor says to him, he goes, "Oh, let's go see this matinee. I've heard it's really quite good." And they watch the first act, and it's terrific. And then at the act break, they go out have a couple more drinks, and they come back for the beginning of Act Two, and it's really quiet on stage. The curtain rises and nothing happens. And the actor turns to Richard Burton and says, "Oh, this is the best part. This is where I come on."
That's funny.
And I wouldn't have that story in my life if it weren't for Pat Fraley.
Oh boy.
In.
Oh boy. I'm going to have to get him on. I've had the pleasure of working with him on some commercials and cartoons from time to time, and he's such a natural teacher. He is so giving. He's just a great guy, and I think one of the best of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, can I keep you for a few extra minutes? We just hit the top.
I'm yours for the evening, however long you want.
All right. I have a young lady here asking. I'm mad I got here late. I don't suppose these get recorded. Oh, yes, they do.
Yes,
they're living on Facebook, and you can visit my YouTube channel, Dave Fennoy Voiceover Training, and they're all there. And of course, they're all free. Nobody pays anything for that. You can pay me for coaching, but just visit my website for that. And I think you can pay Scott Brick for coaching as well, and visit his website, which is right there, scottbrick.net. Let's see. Another question for you. What's the best feedback you've received from an author whose book you've narrated?
The best advice I ever got for how to play a character. It was a difficult challenge. It was a first person point of view book. So essentially it was going to be an 11-hour monologue, but the main character, he had gone through a traumatic brain injury and he had lost all human emotion. It's called Cotard syndrome. It's a very obscure brain hemisphere disorder, and he had no emotion. He was just completely detached. And I was like, geez, well, I could try to sound like Mr. Spock. I mean, he denies his emotions, but he still has them. And so that you can still, it's not monotone. That's what I was worried about, was 11 hours of monotone. But, you are my superior officer. You are also my friend. I have been and always shall be yours. Well, that's contained, but it's not unemotional.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, I could do that. But then the author emailed me about one page into this 300-page manuscript. Thank God he hit me right at the beginning.
Yes. Oh, no, you finished it. Well, listen, let me...
Right. Yeah. Maybe you want to go back.
One little thing.
But what he said was, the important thing about this character isn't that he doesn't have emotion. It's that he used to. And now he's trying to find them again. And I thought, okay, that's a small thing. That is subtlety. But in audiobooks, subtlety plays. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, and subtlety plays always. And I think all too often, as voice actors, whatever the genre, we're trying too hard to use a hammer when a light scratch will work.
Yeah, it's well, another Pat Fraley expression is there's a difference between I'm not going to do it justice. It's something like there's a difference between scratching your ass and scratching it till it bleeds, basically. It's like, God, I should be able, after all these years, I should be able to quote him effectively. But it's true. Subtlety matters. And when we, especially when it's a 15-second, it's a spot, it's a tag, Joe, that was for you. When it's something that small and we see an exclamation mark, too many of us, and myself included, I'm guilty of this. We see that and we think an exclamation mark means volume.
Yeah.
It just means emphasis.
Yeah.
And there are 8 ways that we can emphasize something.
Okay. Give me the 8 ways.
I learned this from Pat Fraley. We can go up or down in volume.
1.
Up or down in pitch.
2.
We can shorten or elongate a word, right? And we can pause before or after a word, or before or after a sentence.
Okay, yeah.
Pitch, volume, pace.
One of the things that I call them traps are when writers have underlined, have put in capital, all in capital letters. I tell my students, one of the things I'm here to do is free you from the tyranny of words and punctuation. Tell me, how often do you disregard the punctuation, what the writer is indicating that he wants or
Well,
she wants?
the way I refer to it, which seems like blasphemy for a book lover as much as I am, I always say sometimes you have to decide when to dishonor the punctuation, because authors are writing on a computer. They are not speaking aloud, and so they don't understand that, especially when you have a word that is, let's say you have a word or a phrase that's repeated. Okay. Authors are taught not to do that. Don't use the same word twice in the same paragraph, let alone twice in the same sentence. But if you do, if you're going to break the rule, do it for a reason. Well, it's typically done to emphasize something,
Yeah.
quite often with irony, although not always. And we look at that and we see, and quite often the author will underline what's repeated. But they don't understand that if we emphasize, however, one of the 8 ways that we emphasize the repetition, that it's not going to pass the smell test.
Yes.
It's
The fact
not,
that it is repeated is emphasis
exactly.
enough.
It's not the repetition that you stress, even though that's our knee-jerk response quite often as performers.
Yeah.
If we did that, if we stressed the repetition, the repeated word or phrase, instead of the modifier like it typically should be, then you would say the greatest line in perhaps in at least top 5 in English literature history, you would say it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and that frankly sucks.
Yeah.
You have to stress the modifier. It
Yeah.
was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Yeah.
In the same way, if we are slavish to punctuation, look, punctuation doesn't exist, not in human speech.
No.
It only exists in human communication.
The written word.
Communication.
My favorite and simplest is if you write hello Bob, it's hello comma Bob, but we don't say hello Bob. We say hello Bob.
Well, also, yeah, exactly, and punctuation does a really poor job verbally. If you're trying to ape the pronunciation, follow those rules, it doesn't allow for okay. So I could say this sentence, and if I followed the punctuation, it would go this way: who do you think you are, anyway? You know,
I hear that all the time. Not that particular, but there's a comma
Yeah.
there, and I'm gonna no, don't honor that comma. And so much
Exactly.
of it,
But
you
also,
have to.
and the question mark. Editors are slavish to punctuation. They have to be. That's their job. Which is why they put a question mark at the end of a rhetorical statement. Who do you think you are, anyway? You know. Instead, if you read it like a question, who do you think you are, anyway? Like that's your name? Come on. It's there, but it's there to give us, it's not the letter of the law. It's the intent.
And a comment that you made earlier about if you want to be a good writer, read more books. If you want to be a good narrator, read more books. I find that so true in being a voice actor in anything, is you need to read language out loud. Understand idiomatic phrases, understand how we speak so you recognize it in written word as opposed to just trying to follow what the punctuation, what the underlined words, where the periods are, because so often the words have to come to us. Our emotions change the rhythm of things. Our inner dialogue changes how we say things or how our character says things.
I think we can lose the forest for the trees when all we're concentrating on is the words.
Yeah.
And are we being precise? Are we enunciating them precisely enough? Are we conveying them precisely enough?
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories that ever happened to me in the studio was when I was teaching. I had a weekly class. I was at Voice Tracks in Studio City, and Alex Hyde-White, wonderful narrator.
Yeah.
He had done a couple of hundred books at this time, and he came to the class, which I always admire. It's like yeah, you've worked enough. You don't really need to go to class. But he wanted to get better throughout his career. He's been like that. And he's the son of Wilfred Hyde-White, famous British character actor. And he's a gifted performer, a gifted narrator, and he got all of the words right. But everybody in that class got all of the words right. You can say the words in the right order,
Yeah.
pronounced the right way, and technically you are correct, but are you really serving the text?
Yes.
Well, he did, because it was this wonderful biography of Truman Capote. And Truman had a woman in his life that he referred to as Big Mama. And I don't remember who she was in his life or who her actual name was. But there was this section where he was reading the scene. And so I'm sitting there out in the control room, and I got 11 other students, behind me. And I'm on the talkback, but Alex is narrating, and he's doing the scene where Big Mama, I'll paraphrase, says, Big Mama said, "I love you, Truman." And Truman said, "No, you don't, Big Mama." She said, "No, Truman, of course I do. I do love you." "No, you don't love me, Big Mama. You can't love me." "Why can't I love you, Truman?" "Because I don't deserve to be loved, Big Mama." And he had done his work, and, he had clearly looked at the 8 ways that we can emphasize things. And he had a wonderful pause before it that was just emotionally charged. And he said it slower, and he said it softer. So really, he's doing 3 things to emphasize it. And it was so beautifully done that on that line, I don't deserve love. I don't deserve to be loved. 11 people and the engineer next to me all gasped, as did I. And so I got on the talkback and I said, "Alex, I have to ask you. You did this. You paused before the line. You got soft on the line. You said it slower than the rest of the dialogue. Were you thinking about that as you said that line?" He said, "No, I didn't think about any of that." I said, "What were you thinking of?" And he said, "I was remembering all the times in my life where I felt unworthy of love." And that was when I knew that if you are really, there's a difference between reading and narrating. Reading is getting all the words right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But narrating is sharing something with the audience.
And feeling it. Letting your own humanity come out.
And the moment that he connected personally with the text is the moment that everybody listening connected with him, and through him, the text.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? That's the perfect story to end on.
Okay.
That's just, it doesn't get any better than that.
Well, we'll go out on the high then.
There you go. There's Scott Brick, man, you don't know, one of my favorite people, one of the world's great narrators, and just a really good guy.
I could and often do say the same things about you, Dave. You're this show that you do every week, every Wednesday, this is a mitzvah for the industry.
Oh, thank you. I have so much fun doing it because I get to speak with people like you, and I feel like I learn and I get to reflect on, oh, yeah, I teach that too. I say it in a different way, but yeah, I'm on the right track. And more importantly, it's such great information for the people who are joining in and listening. And that's really what it's about.
Hey, knowledge not shared is knowledge wasted, right?
There you go. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, and I'm gonna pop in here and say goodbye to everybody. Hey, thank you so much. I want to thank Scott Brick again. Great information. A reminder: ConnectionOpen.com. You got Source Connect. Sometimes it's gonna go down, so. Check it out, ConnectionOpen.com. If I'm teaching with you, they'll give you a 20% reduction. And if you're interested in working with me, DaveFennoy.com, you can book yourself and get you going. Next week, I believe it's Randy Thomas. So all the best, and see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye now.